All right, third graders, this is our second flipped classroom video, and I'm going to read the I can statement. The I can statement says, I can use line plots to show data I have collected with whole numbers, halves, and quarters. So I know you guys have been looking at some measuring and working on some measuring in the classroom. And what we know about measuring is that everything doesn't measure perfectly, like to the inch, for example. So everything doesn't measure perfectly as in 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches, etc. We have halves, we have quarters, we also have eighths and sixteenths, but we're going to talk about quarters and halves today. So we're going to actually plot some data. We're going to plot some data. So let's talk about what plot means. We're going to use an X to plot this data. And when we put the X on a number line, that X actually represents a piece of data, a number in this case. So we'll talk about that as we go through the lesson. So let's look at the data that we're going to plot. We're first going to plot these numbers or these measurements. So we have some mixed numbers, we have some whole numbers, and we have a fraction. So let's look at 2 1/2. Mixed number, a whole number and a fraction. 3/4, that would just be a fraction. 1 1/2, mixed number, and 3, a whole number. So this would be the data that I'm going to plot. Let's say that all of these measure in inches. Okay? My number line needs to be at least 3. It needs to go to at least 3 inches or to the number 3 because my largest number represented is going to be a 3. In order to plot and to show that data, it needs to be at least that long, and it is. We're going to work on halves because I have some data that I need to plot that's going to be half. And we're going to work on quarters because I see the denominator 4. So that's going to be important because that's going to be in quarters. So let's start with the halves first. Between 0 and 1, I have 1/2. If you need to follow along in your journal or write some notes in your journal, you can do that or scrap paper. 1 and 1/2, 2 and 1/2, and then we get to 3. So I have my halves marked on my number line. So now let's look at quarters. That would be 1/4 or 1/4. Okay. 1 and 1/4 and 2 and 1/4. Now let's do 3/4, and that would go here. So we have 0, 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, 1. We'll come back to that and talk about it in a minute. 1 and 1/4, 1 and 1/2, 1 and, you got it, 3/4. We're keeping the pattern. Now we have a whole number 2 and 1/4, 2 and 1/2, 2 and 3/4, and then 3. Okay? So I want you to think about quarters just like the change quarters, money. It takes 4 quarters to make $1. So think about this. 1/4 is here, okay? 2/4 is halfway, like 50 cents, right? And then 75 cents would be 3/4. You have 3/4 or 3/4 of the way to getting to be $1. So now if I add one more quarter, I'm at $1. So let's look at the space in between the increments or the intervals. So 1/4 is from 0 to here, and then from 1/4 to 1/2, 1/2 to 3/4, and 3/4 to a whole. So I try to space them out pretty much the way I think it should be for the 4 parts, and keeping that consistent in my number line. So that's important before we plot. So now we're ready to plot. Remember, plotting, we're going to put in X, and every X is going to represent a number, okay, or our data. So the first data that I need to represent is going to be 2 and 1/2. I'm going to put a check by that because I'm getting ready to plot it now. So I ask myself, well, would it go there? No, because that's just 1. I need to keep moving. I stopped at 2. I need to get to 2 1/2. Here, no, here. If that looks right, and I think that's 2 1/2, and it is, I'm going to put an X there. I plotted it. Now I'm going to look at 3/4. There is no whole number. This is just the fraction 3/4. It's going to go here because it's not at 1 yet. I'm going to check that off because I just plotted it. 1 and 1/2. I'm going to go to 1 and 1/2. That that looks like the right place for me. I'm going to put an X there. Check that off. 3. I need to plot 3. Whole number 1, whole number 2, whole number 3. Now, just like you check your work when you add, subtract, multiply, divide, and any work that you do in math, you should be able to go back and ask yourself, does it make sense? Is it reasonable? And how can I check it? So I have 4 X's. I've plotted 4 numbers. I'm going to go back and check my data, and I do have 4. All of those are represented. So that's a basic way that we can plot numbers. So now we're going to get a little more involved with that. A little more involved. What you're going to see as I'm erasing this, I'm going to talk, what you're going to see sometimes in math would be a table or a chart with data or information. Then you need to take that data and transfer it onto a number line. So I have some data here that we're going to look at. The data actually even has a name for the data in the chart. It says 3rd grade's paper chains. We have some important things to look at here that we don't want to get confused. Number of chains, that's the number sign, right? Number of chains. So 2 chains, and the length of those chains would be 2 inches each. So I have 2 chains that measure 2 inches. So I need to really look at my data before I ever start plotting. Like, what does it mean? What's the title? What am I doing? So think about those things before you even plot. Okay, I'm going to look at my data. I have 1 chain, it's 3/4 of an inch, 3 chains, 1.5, and then 1 inch that's 1 chain that's 4 inches. Okay, quickly kind of looked at that. Now I need to look at my number line. I need to ask myself, will this number line support that data? Will it support that data? Will I be able to plot it on this number line? Well, where does the road end here? 3. It ends at 3. What I think is my length, the highest length, let's see, 2 inches, 3/4, 1.5, 4 inches. I need to take my number line all the way to 4, but we can extend it. So I'm going to come on out. That's 3. So I need to do 3 and 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, and then 4. Okay, and then 4 is going to be here, whole number 4. Make that a little thicker, make that a little thicker so you can see that. All right, so now that my number line goes all the way to 4, and that's my greatest number that I need to plot, I'm good. Now we need to start thinking about how many X's we're plotting. So how many number of chains did 3rd grade make all together? Let's look at that. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 plus 3 is 6. And 6 plus 1 is 7. I need to go ahead and think through these things before I start my work over here. I have 7 paper chains that should be plotted. When I finish, remember I need to check my work and ask myself, hey, did I do what I was supposed to do? Do my X's or my plots match up the number of chains that I said I needed to plot? So I should have 7 X's because I have 7 number of chains here, 7 chains here. So let's start with the first one. I have 2 chains that measure 2 inches. So that's pretty easy. I go over on my number line. That's a whole number 1, a whole number 2. I'm going to use this other color. I'm going to put an X here on 2. But I'm not finished because remember, every X represents a number. I have 2 chains, so I should have 2 X's. Does that make sense? Okay, 2 chains, 2 X's. Check that off. Okay, I have 1 chain that measures 3/4 of an inch. That's not a whole inch. I need to back up to 3/4 and plot that. Okay, and check it off. I have 3 chains that measure 1.5 inch. So I need to look here, 0 to 1. It's more than 1. It's not quite 2. It's 1.5. How many? 3 chains. That's right. How many X's? Can I stop there? Nope. 3 X's, 3 chains on 1.5. I have 1 chain on 4 inches. See that? 1 chain, 4 inches in length. So I'm going to come all the way down to my whole number 4 and put an X. Then I'm going to look at it and I'm going to say, wow, am I finished? Well, I need to count my X's. Start here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 X's, and I had 7 chains that needed to be represented on the number line, and they're there. They're represented. Here's one other important thing. If I were to write this on a sheet of paper, or even if I just walk out now and someone comes in and they don't see the table and I erase it, would we know what we plotted? Who would know what this is? If I wrote it on a piece of paper and someone found this on a piece of paper, this line, number line with all these plots, would we know what it is? No. So it needs a title. This is important. I can't just make up some title. It's easy. The title is in the table. So the title would be 3rd grade's paper chains. So it needs to have a title. That's important. So it looks good to me. We worked on 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, or 3/4, and we get to our whole number all the way down, and we got to 4 because 4 was the largest number. We did all those on in my chart, so it should be the largest number on my number line. So really think about these things as you go through this and work it out. All right, thanks guys, we'll see you next time.